All right, good afternoon, everyone. My guest is Nick Pendleton. He is a Pemberton, excuse me. He is a writer with Counterpunch magazine. He's out of St. Paul, Minnesota. He writes on politics and culture. Nick, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you.
Nick, we could talk about the upcoming 2020 election. I want to first talk about an article you wrote with regard to the rise of anti-Semitism, which you see as a problem on the right. Could you talk a little bit about that, what you see coming down the pike on that score?
Yeah, I think it's a major concern, and I think when we're talking about Donald Trump and bigotry, I think people think there are some groups that maybe use it as focuses on immigrants, it focuses on Muslims at times. And I think what we have to do is remember there's kind of a link with this sort of thinking. I think all marginalized groups. And I think what Trump, while often hiding behind certain political allegiance to Israel, which I think is pretty much getting deep, just kind of based on some financial interest, not really based on any sort of sincere love for the Jewish people. I think it's kind of see that used as a political problem. While meanwhile, the sort of banning playing the sort of new kind of emergence where bigotry is normalized. And we've seen Jewish people always very vulnerable in that respect because they're worldwide such a minority compared to Muslims or Christians.
Okay, Nick, first of all, I want to just mention I'm having a little problem with your audio. It's a little choppy, but I definitely am getting the drift here. So let me respond to that while you maybe tweak your audio. I mean, I think that President Trump has been quite pro Jewish and pro Israel, as far as I can tell. I mean, he's moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, which was something that Congress passed a bill about back in the 1980s, and successive presidents, both Democrat and Republican, did not do. But he did that in fulfillment of Congress's rules and will. And I mean, his son-in-law is Jewish, and his daughter's Jewish. His grandchildren are Jewish. I mean, I just don't think that there's any evidence that he has anything against the Jews. I also really fundamentally reject your premise that he is encouraging bigotry in this country. I think he tends to, he certainly can be rude and obnoxious in his statements, and I do hold that against him. But I think that in the overall sense, he's encouraging making America great for everyone. I don't see any evidence that he's leaving anybody out of that. But so what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with. I hope the sound is better. I'm not sure.
A little bit better.
Okay. I would agree with the fact that when it comes to I think Jewish people specifically, his rhetoric, Mr. Trump has been, very supportive. I just think if you follow the line of basically where he opens up, the floodgates for intolerance, whether he wants to or not, I think there will be Jewish victims of this intolerance. And I guess to address that point where you were saying that Mr. Trump is not doing it, I think that he has, at least you have to admit that in terms of immigration, there has been a real shift in the way he talks about it, and it's kind of fear he kind of drums up without much evidence for of the legit for concern. I mean, called a national crisis or emergency, where basically you just have immigrants trying to make a living, fleeing from political crises of their own homes, and it's framing them as kind of wars that are going to take over the country. And I think with Trump, it is a little bit complicated, right? Because he's not going to explicitly talk about race per se. It's kind of very much founded on this idea of nationhood, and I think what people take from that is kind of assumed. And I think both the right makes something about it and the left makes something about it. I think they're both the same assumptions that are made, and both I think the assumptions are made that immigrants, people of color, Muslims are frightening, and others aren't. And whether or not Trump says these things explicitly, or even thinks these things explicitly, it doesn't entirely matter because his words have led, I think, to a similar conclusion, albeit for different reasons, across the political spectrum.
Look, I think that the left is going to call anyone that doesn't genuflect to their point of view as having something against people based on race. And I think that President Trump's immigration policies are very consistent with past administrations. He wants to make sure that immigration is done in a way that benefits American labor, American industry, and that protects American citizens from immigrants or illegal aliens who may not be coming here for the best reasons. And I think that that's something that goes back in American tradition. President Trump means it a little bit more than perhaps other presidents have when they've made the exact same comments, including the presidents Obama and the Bushes. And I honestly don't think it has anything to do with race. I'm sorry, but I think that, he wants to have a liberal immigration policy, but he wants to make sure that when people come to this country, they're coming here for the right reasons, that they're not criminals and that they're not wanting to, take more than they're giving. So, this is something that benefits all Americans, from all walks of life. It particularly protects American labor, quite frankly, which is why much of the union rank and file have been very pro-Trump. Something that, who was it, Trumpka, the head of the SEIU, spoke recently and said, I'm really surprised by how much my rank and file is supporting Trump. He is protecting the gains that labor has made over 100 years, because labor is a commodity. And by doing so, he's trying to preserve their position, and he's trying to preserve the position of American industry by bringing it back into the United States after some very bad trade deals that have been done by both Republicans and Democrats. So, I think that to try to turn the thing over and say, well, this is proof that he has something against someone because of their race, I just find that to be demagogic, and it's not in the best interest of all Americans, regardless of our race.
Sure. I guess I agree with the fact that, Trump's policy of basically, deportation and security at the border is, very consistent with the past administration. And I think we often make a mistake of calling Trump, something very new and very evil, even when, in fact, many of his policies, particularly on immigration, are consistent with even if you look at Barack Obama, set the record for deportations, right? But I think, why, I think there has to be a reason why people are making these conclusions. I mean, why that Trump is right. And I think that it is because you look at the effect of these policies and who they actually hurt. And I mean, I think there was a story, right, in the New York Times, it came out just the other day, about migrant women and the fact that as they're coming across the border, they're basically being held hostage by the people who brought them there, raped repeatedly as prisoners. And where's Trump when these stories come up?
He spoke about it during the campaign. He said that people coming across the borders, a lot of them are rapists.
No, but I'm saying it's saying the immigrants I'm saying here we are. We have Americans raising immigrants, and he's not talking about it. And instead, he's
Well,
talking
the people that are getting raped are, it's hard to track what happens to an illegal alien once they're in this country because they're undocumented. The problem is the fact that you have such an influx of undocumented people. Now, as far as what you said earlier about whether people assume that Trump has something against race, people based on race, no, I don't think they do. I think that there's a big drumbeat on the part of his enemies, particularly in the media, to try to prove this point. This is a basic narrative that they accept, and many of them believe it. And that they'll parse all his words and they'll try to say, yes, this is proof he's got something against black men and women. And it's just, or other races. And I don't think the American people generally think that. I don't think most, there's recent evidence that shows that he's actually picked up a great deal of support among Hispanics and blacks because they don't believe it. What they believe is that they're getting jobs for the first time, that the economy is doing better for them, and that these are very genuinely progressive times, and that has a lot to do with his policies. I mean, I'm not giving him all the credit, but he is the president, and he has put forth policies that have helped improve the conditions of American workers and American labor and American economy at all levels. And that's something that's in the real sense, the real de facto sense, helping people. So I think that a lot of this noise about him having something against people on race and people that his quote-unquote base, that's just a lot of propaganda that's coming out from the left who want to keep minorities in line with their point of view. And I would argue that the real discussion ought to shift to those policies and how they've hurt minorities, going all the way back to the 1960s. That's the real race conversation we should be having, not whether or not Trump shoots his mouth off about some rude comment, which he does do, and I hold that against him. But those are superficial things. The real race problem are policies that have been put in place, as I say, since the 60s. That's the conversation we should be having. What actually would help the minority community, not this kind of, tit-for-tat politics.
Yeah, no, okay, so I think we might disagree on what those policies would actually be, but I'm in complete agreement with you that much of the talk about Trump is a complete distraction, and I do think the Democratic Party uses that as a way to keep minorities with them, keep them held captive within a party that really hasn't looked out for their interests. I do think that's true, and but I only think it's possible because I think the Republican Party has basically made zero efforts to improve the lives of people of color in any way. But I do agree with your broader point that I think most of the talk about finger pointing, who's the racist and who's that, is basically very much a distraction. I think sort of an elitist distraction where we kind of all argue about our characters and whatnot when we really should be talking about politics.
I mean, absolutely. And I think that the Democratic Party since the 60s have offered black people two things only, and that is abortion and welfare. But I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming election of 2020. I think that President Trump, in spite of the absolute negative avalanche on the part of the elite media, what President Trump calls the deep state, and I think he's right about that, I think he's going to do better this time around than he did last. I think he's going to increase his margins, and I think he's probably going to carry more states. Who do you see coming up in terms of a Democratic candidate that might be able to challenge Trump? I only see one out there that actually could challenge Trump, and that would be Barack Obama. And I don't think he's going to run again. But what do you say about that, Nick?
Oh, okay. So I like that. Okay. Okay. First off, I'm in complete agreement. I think Mr. Trump is the favorite. He should be the favorite. I think he has a greater than 50% chance to win. I think he has only pleased his base and displeased everyone else. So I think you're going to see basically. I think in the Trump camp, you have pro-Trump sentiment is stronger, anti-Trump sentiment is also stronger, but it's just the same people. You know what I mean? So we're going to have probably more support for Trump from people who like him, and probably some anti-Trump fatigue from the people who don't. And I think particularly the Democrats are vulnerable because I think there's real divisions within the party that still haven't been resolved. I think you saw how the Democratic primary played out last time, where basically Bernie Sanders supporters, and rightly so, felt that it was rigged for Hillary Clinton and the sort of establishment, big money Democrats. Mm-hmm. And basically, I think there's a very large split within the party, and I think what we see with Bernie Sanders announcing his presidency run, and then since then getting a record number of small donations, unprecedented amount. I think he's setting the stage to set a much more serious run this time around, and I don't think the Democrats are going to like that or have that. They're already saying, "Oh, he's never going to be the nominee." They already said that after stance on Venezuela. They said we're never going to give it to them, never going to give it to him. And I think that sort of attitude for Sanders and his supporters, which is now probably half the party, and a lot more than half when you look at who's actually committed activists to the party. Yeah. You're going to look at that. That's going to create a division. And I think Sanders can be very popular. He's going to be sabotaged to the establishment. And they're going to put forth a candidate who most of the base actually doesn't like. And you're going to see a lot of Sanders supporters saying, no thanks, we're going to sit this one out. And I think we're going to see basically the same dynamic that happened last time, which was that Trump capitalized within divisions within both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, where basically, Trump had a charisma run on his own, and basically not need any kind of infrastructure from either of the major political parties, which I think are both kind of crumbling, at least from a sense of people's belief in them, if not institutions.
I saw Bernie Sanders he appeared on a talk show, and I thought he looked pretty good. I mean, he's fairly straightforward and honest in his convictions. In a way, he's quite similar to Trump in many ways, in that he wants to disengage from international entanglements, and he wants to support American labor. I think that even though he won't come out and admit it, I think he is pretty tough on immigration. And it's interesting to watch some of the liberal Democratic establishment and people over at MSNBC. All of a sudden, it's like they're war hawks. They're Trump can't withdraw from Syria. He can't stop this nuclear deal with Iran. And Trump is trying to he's trying to de-escalate America's war engagements around the world, which is something that traditionally I thought the left supported. He's trying to disengage. He's trying to ask our allies, like for example in NATO, to take care of their own defenses, or if they're going to have us help, that they should help pay for it. I mean, these are things that generally liberals have been talking about going all the way back to Vietnam. And yet all of a sudden now, because it's Trump doing it, they're becoming like war hawks. We can't do this. We can't pull out of Syria. And that kind of thing. So I think that on these issues, Trump has it quite right. And he also is quite right on the trade issues. Another thing liberals have been talking about since NAFTA, renegotiating the NAFTA deal and the World Trade Organization, and trying to make a deal that makes puts America first, frankly, in those terms. Something the left also has been talking about since the days of Bill Clinton, and yet Trump is actually trying to do it. So, I think that he's got the right issues. I think the only thing, it seems to me, that the Democrats have and the left has is this irrational and unarticulated hatred for Donald J. Trump.
Well, I don't think it's a very inspiring message. So I don't think that's going to get done. And I think that, other than, I think, Bernie Sanders and like Elizabeth Warren, and I think there's some sincere, honest Democrats with honest policies who are kind of tend not to talk about Trump very much because they know that's just not a good strategy. But I think most of the mainstream Democrats, they don't really have any policy besides the aren't Trump. And I think that that's a less popular position than they assume it is. It works, very well for the circles that they're around, basically, liberal, rich circles. But it doesn't really work for, I think, much of the country. Either, openly support Trump, and I think there's a lot of bad reasons that people support Trump. But I think either they openly support Trump, or they kind of see him as a continuation of the status quo, and basically their lives are getting worse and worse for the last 50 years economically, no matter who's in office. So they aren't going to see an anti-Trump campaign as that inspiration.
Yeah, I don't think you can make that case. What do you think about this very unusual candidacy of Howard Schultz from Starbucks? I actually think that he's someone who could beat Trump because he's like Trump in many ways. Except he's liberal. He's more liberal than Trump. Trump's more conservative. I actually think he's a formidable figure. He's a businessman who he knows how to make things work. He understands, getting rid of onerous regulations and keeping taxes low and other things that actually help the economy. What do you think of him?
I'm not encouraged by the idea of any businessman, whether it's Trump or someone from Starbucks or Bloomberg, running for office. I just think it's a different job. Running a business and running a government are vastly different. I think almost contradictory goals. I think if you're looking at business, the goal to make a profit. The goal of the government is provide for the people within that government. And I think, you talk about regulations, I think, it's not good to have a businessman running the government. I think you have, basically, the government should be there to, regulate business from causing harm to people. And I think that kind of really contradicts, one of the government's major goals. In terms of electability, maybe you make some good points in the fact that kind of people are looking for something new and looking for someone maybe to bring immediate relief. But I think long term, the goal is this kind of idea of handing over our government to business officials is scary.
I think that a successful businessman, especially like a Donald Trump or a Howard Schultz, they understand the inside of what makes a business work, and they know what's wrong with business. They know the downside to it. So to my way of thinking, that makes for a very good chief executive. America is a nation of businessmen, basically. We're the first society in human history to honor and actually hold up as a virtue the idea of being in business and being a private sector business person and a business trader. And which gets me to my other point here, and I want to ask you about this. You've written many articles supporting Bernie Sanders. You mentioned Elizabeth Warren. Bernie Sanders, I think, has been, if not presently is, an open socialist. He refers to himself as a democratic socialist. So don't several new members of Congress. It seems to me that's not going to make it in the United States. They might at most attract maybe 20, 25, even 30% of the electorate. But socialism is something that it's contrary to our American way of governance. It's contradictory to our American approach to life. It's against our ethos, and it's really an alien system. And so I don't think that an open socialist, is not that there haven't been in the past, but I just don't think that's going to make it in this country once you start to peel away the onion and people see what that actually means. What say you?
Well, I think Trump has kind of proven that conventional wisdom and conventional, kind of belief in this sort of sentimental kind of American way where the country was, very prosperous under, the system of capitalism. I think that's kind of, people are losing faith in that. And I think, both Trump showed that and Sanders showed that. And I think while people may be drawn to Trump because he's something new and different, or at least he appears to be. In many ways, it's the same thing as Sanders. I think there's such a disillusionment with the president's era, which has so many people in poverty and the rich with so much money compared to the poor. The people are saying, hey, why not? Let's try the socialism thing. It doesn't have the same stink on it, in part because, the socialism regime that, America said we're supposed to be scared of. I mean, that was so long ago, and that kind of resonates only for an older audience. I mean, I think it's a real age split, is I think the major point. Is that basically you haven't really seen an organized socialist superpower in, about half a century, so it's kind of like people are not really knowing what this is, and I don't think they're really scared of it. They're more scared of the president. I mean, they're more scared of capitalism and neoliberalism because that's what's happening right now.
Oh, I think that if people are scared, then they need to get outside their shell, because these are some of the most exciting times we've had in my lifetime, and I'm a lot older than you. I think getting back to a capitalist modality has begun the process, anyways, and dismantling 100 years of creeping socialism, which is really why they despise Trump, has resulted in more growth on a local level and on the ground for more people, because that's what works. And socialism is essentially it's the hyper-nationalist nanny state. It's government control over, the classic socialist definition of socialism in the dictionary is public ownership of the means of production. What that means is public ownership of education, public ownership of welfare, public ownership of health, as in Obama's last gasp of socialism, a nationalization of healthcare, and all these other, nationalizing police. I mean, all of these things are old, regressive ideas that are not well suited to American individualism and American sovereignty and American ideas of success. And there's nothing new about that. The fact that younger people are embracing that is because they're ignorant. They don't remember the old Soviet Union. I mean, they don't remember what socialism actually looks like when it's implemented in any society it's ever been implemented in. So, I think that people are wise enough of us are wise enough, and there's enough of historical memory and present understanding of conditions that this will never be accepted in this country. And President Trump is doing a brilliant job, especially in the State of the Union address, in calling it out. America will never have socialism. We're never going to have authoritarianism at that level, where the government has such an authority over our individual lives.
Yeah, so I think we agree that Trump is very popular and more popular than people think. I think we disagree with the reasons why, because I think Trump is sort of a response to Obama in many ways, but I think you look at the policies of Obama, and they weren't socialist. I mean, public school. He was very focused on getting rid of public schools, handing them over to charter schools, and handing them over to the private sector.
I don't agree. That's a local issue. He was into Common Core, which is a nationalization of curricula, and which is essentially transfers the actual content of the schools to this kind of national standard, which really doesn't work. I mean, if you take a look at that curricula, I mean, it's not exactly functional. It is training American students to become essentially to read manuals as opposed to think cognitively. And and also it's not just Obama either. I think that Trump it's a reaction to the Bush's constant international interventionist wars, and to Obama's nanny state and his surveillance and his control freak obsession with listening in and expanding the surveillance state. Trump is trying to dismantle both of those things. And I think people need to understand that. They don't understand it because the media is all part of this establishment way of looking at things, and they want to keep that out of the consciousness of Americans, especially young Americans.
So we agree. Like, homophobia is a complete disaster. I mean, I think what they're trying to do with standardized tests really does, strip away, the right of, of the individual, as you say, to actually learn, learn about becoming a full human, a full citizen, all that. So, homophobia is a complete disaster. And we agree, the wars are complete disasters, the surveillance are complete disasters. And I think this kind of brings up something maybe which we've seen like in the kind of populist.
You're starting to sound like a conservative. You just don't know it.
Well, I mean, I don't mind agreeing. And
the things you're saying, I mean, you might want to revisit your liberalism, frankly. You're a conservative.
Well, I like socialism. I really do. I mean,
take another look at it. I mean, you're a smart guy. I mean, come on. Really. Anyway, go on.
So I think. So I'm sorry. What were we saying?
No, you were saying you agree with this and you agree with that.
Sure. I mean, I think. Here's what I'm saying. I was saying that you look at something like what's going on in France with this yellow vest movement, which I think has been. There's not really a political ideology to it. It's kind of a unified, unified sort of backlash.
It's anti-big government.
Yeah, policies present day, and whatever you want to call it. You're going to call it anti-government. I'm not. I'm not going to call it anti-government.
Okay.
Basically, what I'm saying is the kind of seeds that we're having here is also happening in France, and I think the only encouraging sign of whatever is going on right now, which I think a lot of people are very confused about, is that basically you have a sort of a consensus with the Macrons and whatever Clintons and whoever at the top. They have a sort of consensus, which is imperialist, which is basically people call it neoliberal, and then you have the everyone else at the bottom having a response against that. And I think there's many different ways that can go. The way of a Trump. It can go the way of Sanders. And I think there'll be a big difference in which direction. But I think that the fact that people are just saying this isn't working, whatever is happening right now, I think that's growing.
Well, I do think it's working, and the one of the things that's always separated America from other societies is that we've always had upward and downward mobility, the ability of people in the lower strata to, through creativity and through luck and through their own smarts, have been able to work their way up, and vice versa. We've always had people on the top who have gone down because of their lack of same. That is one of the very basic aspects of a free system, of a free market system, as opposed to a more authoritarian system where you have an elite. Sometimes they claim to be enlightened. They claim to be smarter than the rest of us, essentially dictating to us how we are to be educated, how we are to receive health care, frankly, whether we're to live or die, and other aspects. And I think that we are seeing, and I think that the liberals are making a big mistake if they don't understand that it's these ideas that are at the core of the Trump counter-revolution, that people are tired of this kind of elitist idea of being told, what they're to think, how they're to be educated, what their health is supposed to look like. In other words, whether they can live or die. There's more of a movement toward local control. Localism is a big part of the Trump movement. The idea that local communities and states can reassert their right under the Constitution because that's where people live and that's where we elect representatives locally and statewide. They're more closely reflecting our values, whether we're progressives or conservatives or whatever. And that's a big part of the the Trump counter-revolution. And I think that the left is making a big mistake if they don't come to understand that, and if they continue to rather focus on these demonizations that are false, and that have become more and more people are realizing that they're false. But anyway, yeah, Nick, please.
Yeah. So no, I agree with that. He began to kind of understand the root of what something means, and I do think they get distracted by trying to understand it. In many ways, kind of reflect their own political goal. And I do think there's a sort of longing for the local and the kind of community aspect that has kind of been dismantled. But I think that has been dismantled largely by the free market, and basically this idea that we would take away funding for localized public spaces, public goods, public transportation, public health care, which I think the big problem with Obamacare, which I think Obamacare, thinks that's a big problem with Obamacare, is that basically you're forcing, to pay for it when basically it's just a handout to big insurance companies. And so it's basically, it's socialism for the very rich, where you're basically using using the sort of taxation, if you will, to rob people who frankly would rather not pay for healthcare, keep them healthy, because they simply can't afford it, and that's economic state they're in. So it's really, I think that's why when Trump can say Obamacare is a disaster, and people will agree with it, but I don't think a public healthcare system where you basically take out those private insurance would be a disaster. I mean, I think it's a human right, and I don't think if someone's dying, I don't think they'd see it as a handout for them to automatically get health care, whether they deserve it or not.
So do you think that we should take out all the private health insurance companies and just transfer it to direct government control? Because that's what, single payer is. I mean, it's government-controlled healthcare.
Yeah, I think we should do that. I think it's a lot less expensive.
Okay, I mean, I couldn't disagree more. I think a good example of a healthcare system, and I know it's an imperfect example, is Switzerland. I know it's a rich country, I get that, but they have universal health care. They have a law that says that every citizen has to have health care. But they leave it entirely up to the private sector in terms of where you get it and how much you want to get. You just have to have a minimum. And if you can't afford it, they will come in and subsidize you if you apply. To me, that seems to be a much better system. It's kind of like here in Massachusetts, where I am, you have mandatory automobile insurance if you put a car on the road, and it's a minimum insurance. You can't drive unless you have it. But it's up to you where you buy it. It's up to you how much you want. And I think that it leaves in place the entire issue of choice and private sector. And I suppose if you can't afford it, then you don't get it as a car owner. But with health, it is something that there has to be a safety net. You have to have a means by which someone can get it if they can't afford it. We do have Medicaid, which is exactly what that is on the state level. And to expand it and then to get into the rationing and the death panels and the government control, which is exactly what's happened in every socialized health system in the world, that's not really the American way. But anyways, Nick, we're getting toward the end of the program, so talk a little bit about, where people can read your articles and get information about you, and where they can look at your website and whatnot.
Sure. So all my political articles are published at counterpunch.org.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything I write will be up there. I have an email address linked at the bottom of each of my articles, which I'm happy if people want to contact me. I think Counterpunch is a great site, and they're open to a lot of ideologies, including liberal libertarian ideologies, which maybe some of your listeners are more sympathetic to. And so I think it's kind of a great place for a political discussion across the political spectrum that kind of deviates from that thought, like we did today.
So Counterpunch, I wonder if they publish an article by a right winger like me, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean they Paul Craig Roberts,
Yeah.
frequent the guys that publish. Maybe I don't know.
Who knows? All right, Nick Pemberton. Listen, thanks so much for joining me. It's been great fun.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, have a great day.
All right, you too. Take care.